All the best. Good morning to everybody. And we are starting a new book. Ele Shmot Bnei Israel. Those are the names of the children of Israel that came to Egypt or coming to Egypt. And of course, first of all, we have to understand the title of this book is Shmot. Shmot is names. And yes, you will say, okay, that's because the first pasuk is talking the Ele Shmot Bnei Israel. But we have to understand, a title of the book is much more than just because the first pasuk it's got this word in it. There is a reason for everything. Now, Shemot, names, is a very important thing in Judaism. Words are meaningful, and names are even more, because names is really the acid of what you are. In other words, when we look in Sefer Bereshit in the beginning, when Adam, the first human being that was created by God, is giving names to all the animals and all the things in the creation. And they say that his wisdom was much more than an angel because he could give names. What does it mean? What's a big deal in giving a name? A name has got an inner meaning. And that's exactly the thing. When Adam Arishon, when Adam gave a name, for example, for a donkey, Chamor, it meant something. Chamor is chomer, chobriyut, everything's got a meaning, an inside meaning. And now also the Torah is telling us when Am Yisrael are going to Egypt, the names are really what they've got with them when they went into Egypt. In other words, as we see the blessing of Yaakov Avinu in the last parsha, in the end of Sefer Bereshit, when he's giving each one of the sons, let's say his qualities, his abilities, and all those things in the brachot, which is giving, the blessing. And this is exactly the tools that they have when they went into Egypt. Those are the tools that gave them the strength to go through all those hardship in Egypt and then coming out as Am Yisrael. So that's in order to understand what is the idea of names. So names it's not just a title, it's much more than it is. Now, we want to know what really happened in Egypt. How is it that those people, Joseph and his family, that were princes, that were the high society of Egypt, because Joseph, with his wisdom, he ruled the country, and he brought prosperity and wealth to the Egyptian nation. And this suddenly, his people are becoming slaves? Impossible. How does a thing like this happen? So the Torah is explaining to us it was all in stages. And the big lesson for us, we always talk about it, and it's important to talk about it, because the big lesson for us is that what was is what will be. What is happening now, it was what happened yesterday and is going to happen tomorrow. That's what Shlomo HaMelech says, En chadash tachat Hashem. There's nothing new under the sun. And if we want to look in our short history, not the long history, when we look at the story of Egypt, it's exactly the story of the Nazis, Yimach Shimam V'Zichram. It's the same old story, because here in Egypt, they didn't have any intention in the beginning to kill the Jews or to slave them. What they wanted is the Jews to leave Egypt. And why? Let's see why. What was the reason? So the Torah is telling us, Vayamot Yosef, and Yosef died, and all his brothers and the whole generation, and the children of Israel were multiplying in unbelievable way, and they were all over the country. So first of all, the Or HaChaim HaKadosh is explaining to us that there are stages. In the beginning, because why is the Torah telling us the whole story when Joseph died and brother died and generation died? Why do we need to know? What's the importance of this? So Or HaChaim HaKadosh explains that what was happening is when Joseph is alive, we were princes. We are treated like the high society of Egypt. Then when Joseph died, and only the brothers were still there, so they were considered like equals. They were not anymore the high society. They were apart from the society, the normal society. When the brothers died, then they were now the low life of the society. They were the let's say the dogs, that not important people, but still didn't do anything with them, as long as the generation that came to Egypt was still alive. But when all this generation died and Am Israel were multiplying, then all the problems started. And why? Vatimale haaretz otam. It's always the day. They were all over. And what's written right afterwards? Vayakom melech hadash, and a new king raised up, a new pharaoh. Why? Because what was happening is Am Israel were living in a ghetto. Now, a ghetto, when we say ghetto, we think it's a bad thing. Real truth is that a ghetto is not a bad thing. A ghetto is an unbelievable good thing. Why is it good?
Put it next to your ear.
The ghetto was like a neighborhood of people from the same kind. That was the idea of the ghetto. When the Jews, when the children of Yaakov came to Egypt, Joseph wanted them to keep the tradition and everything, so he put them in the best place in Egypt, Goshen. It was the best place in Egypt. And they had beautiful homes. And by the way, the same situation was all over, where all the traditional Jews, they lived together, because especially for Shabbos, you can see it till today in a lot of places in the world. The religious, the Orthodox Jews, they live together in the same neighborhood. And it can be a very rich neighborhood. And if we want an example, for example, when we say Ayarat Pituach, is like a development settlement. That's Ayarat Pituach, yes? Herzliya Pituach is Ayarat Pituach. It's also Pituach. It's also development. But it's Herzliya Pituach. Very rich people live there. Talking about the village. There is a village, there's Kfar Shmaryahu, and there's other villages. But Kfar Shmaryahu is not exactly a village. In other words, the description, the title, is not exactly always what it means in our eyes. It can be good and it can be bad. So in other words, the first ghetto in the world was the best place for the Jews to live. And it was Goshen. Unfortunately, what happened? They left Goshen. Why? What was so bad there? As we all know, to be a spiritual person is not always very easy. Because you have all the temptation, especially living in Egypt, and you see all the going life and all the physical side and all the materialistic stuff they've got. You want it also. So the young generation, they wanted all of this. So they start moving out from Goshen and moved into the big city. And then all the problems started. When Mr. Muhammad opened his window in the morning and saw that the big mall that the big store in front of him that used to sell, let's say, hardware, whatever, that was called Abdallah and Coop. Now it's called Zilberstein. And then the other shop, the supermarket that was Ahmed, now is owned by Stein. In other words, he sees all those Jewish names, and all those Jews are really going into his life. They're controlling everything. They buy everything. He didn't like it. And what happened then? Vayakom melech hadash. A new king arrived. New rules. I always tell this story of my father. It's the same story in Germany. By the way, when Pharaoh is saying then, look at the people of the children of Israel, they're multiplying, they're big. Let's get wise. Because they're going to go more, and if something happens, they're going to control us, they're going to fight against us. Let's make him move. Let's make him move from here. In other words, the idea at first was not, let's say, slaving them, making them slave. The idea in the beginning was, get out of Egypt. We don't want you here. And the same story was in Germany. The German didn't want to kill the German Jews in the beginning. Why? Because they were, think about it from a very logical point of view. At the end of the day, they were living with them together. And in First World War, they were fighting with them together. My grandfather had medals from the First World War. And so it was a little complicated, like to start and slave them and kill them. So first what they did, they put new rules for the Jews. They had to wear this yellow thing. Then they had to pay special taxes. For example, my grandfather, he was a cattle dealer. And normally the way it was working, you bought the cattle, then you gave it to the butcher. When the butcher sold the meat, he paid you and you paid the taxes, which is the normal way that you do things. One day he gets a note that he has to pay the taxes before he sold the cattle. In other words, not enough that he had to buy the cattle and he didn't sell it yet, he had, on top of buying the cattle, paying taxes for something he didn't earn. So he went to the governor of the region and he told him, and the governor told him, they were good friends, told him, Mr. Hamburger, I have to tell you, you are 100% right. And if you go to trial, you will win. But I have to tell you, I don't know what's going to happen to you afterwards because things are happening here. And if you're asking me, it's the time for you to live. And he came home. And when he came home, he talked to my grandmother, Oma Sarah, and he told her the story. And he didn't want to live because he was a very wealthy guy and he was well known all over the area. But my grandmother is like we see in our Parsha, the figures of the women, the heroic that they've got inside there, like Miriam, this little girl who comes to her father and says, what are you doing? You have to do this and that. And if we have time, we'll talk about it. And we see the daughter of Pharaoh saving a kid. And we see those two midwives saving the kids also, not killing them. And there are so many things that we see with the women. And exactly this is what happened in my family. When my grandfather came to my grandmother and she told him right away, we are leaving. Unfortunately, one of my aunties stayed there. She was married, whatever it was. And you all know what happened. A part of the family went to Ecuador. That's the story of each one of us. But unfortunately, not everybody saw the sign on the wall. And what was happening in the beginning, they just wanted us out. But then when we didn't go out, it all changed. The same thing was in Egypt. When they put special taxes on the Jews and told them to do special jobs, they were thinking the Jews will realize that that's not the place for them and leave. They didn't leave. And then Pharaoh tells to himself, 1 minute, I'm stupid. I've got here cheap labor. It costs me nothing. So I'm going now to slave them. And then all the problems start. And it all started because we are spreading everywhere. In Germany, my father, Alav Shalom, always told me, the Jews were the minority, a very small percentage in society, but they hold the, let's say, almost all the money of Germany. They were the richest people in Germany. And what do you think? The going liked it? I mean, there were problems. The first one to blame is the Jews. And it happens everywhere. The assimilation that we've got, that's our biggest problem.
No sound.
And that's what was happening in Egypt. And that's unfortunately also happening now. So we have to learn from the past and fight it and try and find the right way. How do we deal with those things? We see Moshe Rabbeinu. After, you see, they said they came a king, they didn't know Joseph. One of the interesting things is, how could he not know Joseph? Joseph was something that happened, let's say, 90 years ago, and he's the ruler of Egypt. He needs to know his history. Impossible that doesn't know what happened with Joseph. One of the explanation is, first of all, he didn't want to know, and that's what happened. And it happens always. The Jews come in being prosperous and good to the area, and then they're going want to send them away, or even worse, as we see. But one of the beautiful, I think the Rav Zalman Sorokin says it, he didn't know Joseph, he didn't know the story of Joseph. He didn't know that his brother wanted to kill him, and then they sold him, and nothing helped. They didn't want his dreams to come true, but God wanted them to come true. And what happened in the end is that what they were doing against the dream was really making the dreams come true. They wanted to kill him, they sold him, and if they wouldn't have sold him, his dream wouldn't come true. In other words, they were the tools for his dream to come true. And what is Pharaoh doing now? The same thing. Who is raising up the savior of Am Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu? Who? Pharaoh himself. Where? In the palace. Who are the educators? Who are the teachers? The best of the best. The creme de la creme, how teaching Moshe Rabbeinu to be the savior of Am Yisrael. In other words, he himself, with his laws, he's really, let's say, making the Mashiach to come in the best way. He is the one who is raising up in his palace the Mashiach of Am Yisrael. Unbelievable. That's God. If God wants something, that's what's going to happen, and that's what it is. And nevertheless, even the worst thing you're doing, you think that you're going to ruin everything. No, you are just building it. And then, if we want to talk a few minutes about this, which is also very interesting, this is a mashal of the Magid Midubla, and we want to put in our way. There's a whole discussion in our parsha between Moshe Rabbeinu and the Kodesh Baruch Hu. And it's unbelievable how this discussion is going for 7 days. I'm not going to go how we learn it. We learn it from the words. It's very easy to see. But what is going on here? What is the discussion about? God tells you to do something, you do it. So we have to understand who is Moshe Rabbeinu and what is this discussion all about. So this guy wanted to buy a new car. So he saw in the paper that a firm in Haifa are selling all the old cars. They're replacing the cars, they're changing them, and they want to sell the old fleet of cars. The problem is that he is not in good relationship with this firm. He knows them and they know him. And he knows it's impossible for him to go and try and buy. So he's got two friends. One is living near this firm, and he can go there very easy and just buy a car for him. The problem is this guy doesn't exactly know how to deal and wheel with those people. He knows nothing about vehicle. He knows nothing about cars. From the other side, he's got somebody who lives far away, but this guy, he used to work with this firm, and he used to be in charge on all the vehicle and on all the cars. And he also is a mechanical guy. He knows all about cars. And he was sure that if this guy is going there, he is going to do the best deal. So he phones this guy and he tells him, my dear friend, I want you to go and buy a car from me there. So the guy said, well, why me? Who am I? I'm just was working there in the, he said, send your friend. You got a friend. We have a mutual friend. He lives near the plant, near the farm. Send him. He says, no, he doesn't know anything about cars, but you not only you know about cars, you were a part of this firm, and you know all the people there, and you know how to talk with them, and you will get me the best deal. And that's exactly the argument between Moshe Rabbeinu and the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Moshe Rabbeinu says, who am I to save Am Yisrael? Who am I? I am nothing. What do I know? It says, Moishale, where were you raised? Look at your life. Look where you went, what you went through. What do you think? I just did it for nothing? Why did I send you to be raised up in the palace of Pharaoh? So you know the language. You know how to talk with kings. You know their behavior, the manners. Aaron, he doesn't know anything about it. He wasn't raised up in a palace. He was raised up in a slave place. What does he know? How can he go in there and deal with Pharaoh? You were raised in order to do this job. You are the best man and the only man who can do the job. Unbelievable when we look at it. Pharaoh himself is raising the savior of Am Yisrael. And then another interesting, unbelievable point in the Parsha is for Moshe Rabbeinu is being saved by the daughter of Pharaoh himself, which is unbelievable. Again, a part of this unbelievable story. How is it that Pharaoh himself is raising up in his palace a Jew? And how is it that his daughter is saving a Jew? His daughter. But it's happening. Unbelievable. Then he grows up. You know, as we all know, we can talk about all those things here for hours with Owen. But I want to be particular about a few things. And this is one of the most important points for us, because as we always say, the Parsha, the Torah, is not stories. It's a way of life. So look at this Moshe Rabbeinu. He's being raised up in the palace of Pharaoh. He's got all the good of this world, everything. Palace of Pharaoh. Whatever he wants, he can get. He grows up and he goes out and he sees an Egyptian guy hitting a Jew. And he knows that he is a Jew. And suddenly he finds out that all the stories that were told to him in the palace are not exactly true. And Pharaoh is not exactly a righteous king, because Pharaoh, what he was doing, he was playing the games that the German Nazis also played. When the world was sent films of camps where the Jews are having concerts and shows and their kids playing around like a summer camp, which we all know was not exactly the truth. And that's exactly the game that Pharaoh was playing. He's got this, how do you say, toy Jew. He's got this Jew in his palace, and he's teaching him that the Egyptians are the best people in the world, and the Jews are bad people, etc., etc., etc. But suddenly, this Moshe goes out, and he sees the truth in front of his eye. And the Torah is telling us, he says,
I wanted to charge it while it's talking.
He looks around, right and left, and he sees there's nobody. No one there. What does it mean? What is God trying to tell us? Moshe Rabbeinu's got a problem. He is half Jew, half Egyptian, because he is a Jew originally, but he was raised up in the palace of Pharaoh. And now he stands in front of a dilemma. What am I going to do? I've got here a Jew and I've got an Egyptian. Who should I choose? What should I do? Will I let the Egyptian hit and maybe even kill the Jew? Or should I interfere and help the Jew? And he looks right and says, Rav Yitzchak Bernstein Zatzal says, in life, you cannot be half-half. You have to choose what you are. And we all have those questions. And especially Jews living in the diaspora. We are privileged that we are here in Eretz Israel. And here also we have this question between keeping the tradition or going with the Western culture, whatever it is. And the question is even harder if you live with the Goyim. When you live among the Goyim, like we were talking about the German Jews, yes? They wanted to be Germans. So they changed. The reform movement started in Germany. And that's when all the problems started, because you cannot be half-half. They say you be a German outside and a Jew inside. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Unfortunately, that's not the way we are. We have to choose what we are. You cannot, let's say this guy was learning in the yeshiva, and he comes to speak with the rabbi, and the rabbi tells him, no, your kid is an unbelievable scholar. Really, he learns the whole day, Gemara, unbelievable. But I have a problem. When night comes, he takes off his yeshiva clothes, puts simple clothes on, and goes to clubbing, goes to drinking and gambling. What do you say? Can this be? Is this possible? Can you even think about a thing like this? Definitely not. Doesn't work like this. You cannot be. You have to decide if you are a Talmid Yeshiva or you are, let's say, a playboy. Doesn't go together. And this is the question that Moshe Rabbeinu is standing in front. What should I do? I have to choose, because I cannot be half-half. Vayar ki en ish. He looked right, he looked left. Right, I've got an Egyptian. Left, I've got a Jew. But really, what do I have? Vayar ki en ish. So there is nobody. There is nobody there. You cannot be half-half. You have to choose. What is Moshe Rabbeinu doing? He's choosing. And he's choosing the right way. I'm a Jew 100%. And he kills the Egyptian. In other words, he puts the Egyptian part of him and puts his inside ground. That's it. I am 100% Jew. And when he's doing this, he knows that he has now to give up all the good of this unbelievable, joyable, physical, materialistic world. All the joys of the palace of Pharaoh. All the joys of the flesh. And run away. So from being a prince, he is a runaway. Unbelievable. This is Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's the lesson for us, to choose the right thing to do. When we stand in front of the question, what to be, it's like the question of Shakespeare, to be or not to be. That's the question. Can I be half and half? No, that's not to be. If I want to be, I have to choose a side. And our side is being Jewish. And this is something that has to lead us all over our life. And this is exactly the reason what is happening and always with Am Yisrael. The minute that Am Yisrael want to be like the Goyim, the mingled with them, v'timale haaretz otam, problem starts. Because God told us, you are like oil. You can put oil in water and stir it as long as you want, but the minute you leave it, the oil goes up. That's Am Yisrael. You can do tzuras to Am Yisrael, you can do problems, you can try and kill them, you can do whatever you mean, you mix them, whatever. The end of the days, Am Yisrael raises up. And that's the way we are. We cannot mingle with the Goyim. We have to lead ourselves, our families, Am Yisrael, and then to lead all the world, all the Goyim, to the right way. Bayom hahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad. That's the salvation. That's the Geula. When we come to this, and as we learn of this unbelievable year with all the corona going around, that God is showing us that the whole world is one. But we have to learn the lesson. What is our job in this world? To choose, not to be like the Goy, to be 100% Jew, not 50-50, 100% Jewish, 100% going the way of God. And if we learn this lesson, this corona will be the last disease of this world. And then we will start our way to the salvation, to the Geula, to the end of days, to the beauty of the day that the whole world will be connected together. Ke'ish echad, belev echad. Have a nice day, all of you. Thank you very much.